Okay, so the NFL draft is the single most important event for teams like the Texans to try and acquire some real talent. But out of every single draft since 1977, which NFL draft had the most talent available and basically made it so no team could possibly go wrong? Well, in this video, I wanted to try and cut the fat away and get straight to the point, so we're only going to be looking at 4 NFL drafts, making the case for each draft class as the greatest ever. So at the end of the video, it will be up to you to decide what is the best draft in NFL history. So here's a table on every single NFL draft from 2022 all the way back to 1977 when they first started using the 12-round format. This table shows the year of each draft, the number of Hall of Famers per draft, how many Pro Bowl players, how many rounds each draft had, and the number of players that aren't in the Hall of Fame just yet. The case could be made that all pro selections are more important than Pro Bowls, which is true, but in order to have more data, I chose to use the number of Pro Bowlers instead. Now, there is obviously a lot to break down from this table, but after crunching some numbers on the ye olde calculator, it turns out the average number of Pro Bowlers per draft from 2017 to 1977 is 30.26, and the number of Hall of Famers is just over 3 with 3.1 Hall of Famers per draft. So in order to find the best of the best when it comes to the NFL draft, here is all of the drafts since 1977 that have an above average number of Pro Bowlers and Hall of Famers. Obviously, more recent drafts are going to be lower due to less time, but it is very clear that the NFL had some of its highest talent levels coming into the league in the late 2000s, early 1990s, and mid 1980s. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into examining the best draft classes ever individually, and let's begin with the legendary 2007 draft class. But first, this video is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. So Underdog is a fantasy football based app where you can choose different games such as their very popular best ball format and choose different players and enter a draft. And they also feature my favorite contest, the Pick'em entry style, where you can choose a different player and select higher or lower. And even the other day I was able to claim an NHL and NBA Pick'em entry, and you can make your own Pick'em entries during the NFL playoffs. And also, if you win your Pick'em entry like I did there, you can multiply your money up to 20 times the amount that you put in. And when you sign up with Underdog, use promo code TUBFROG, it'll be in the description and the pinned comments, to get a 100% deposit match on up to $100 if you use the code. Also, you should look at this graph to see if your state qualifies for this app, and chances are it probably does. So once again, use my promo code, and thank you to Underdog Fantasy. Now, the 2007 NFL Draft was loaded with some of the most iconic players of the 2010s and NFL history. Although there is only one official Hall of Famer in this class, there are 5 Hall of Fame level players in this draft who made 37 Pro Bowls, an impossible 22 All-Pro selections, and had every single one of these 5 guys make it into the Hall of Fame All-2010s team. And these 5 men are Calvin Johnson, Joe Thomas, Patrick Willis, Brady Quinn, and Adrian Peterson. In the 2011 season alone, all 5 of these guys were pretty indisputably the best in the entire league at their position, breaking countless records in the process. And the thing is, somehow, this draft is far from top heavy. So many Pro Bowl level players I'm sure you've heard of, like Eric Weddle, Reggie Nelson, Dwayne Bowe, Joe Staley, Greg Olsen, Paul Posluszny, Lamar Woodley, Ryan Khalil, Marshall Yonda, Marshawn Lynch, Lawrence Timmons, and Nick Folk. Except, there is one massive black spot in this draft, and there's no point in ducking it any longer. Despite the seemingly supernatural talent levels in this draft, the first overall pick was Jamarcus Russell. Our good old pal Jawalrus was so bad at his profession of American football, I basically made a whole video dedicated to breaking down his failure. And if you don't know much about him, well, he basically was given a gargantuan rookie contract after holding out, and then just said, well, I got my money, I guess I'm just done improving. But unfortunately, while this draft has perhaps the worst first overall pick ever, they also have maybe the worst quarterback class ever as well. The quarterback from this class that had the most career passing yards was Trent Edwards, who was out of the league by 2012 and is doing something in the tech industry, I guess. So I just look at this quarterback group and think, if only just two of these guys were moderately competent, this draft class might be pretty untouchable. But this next draft class, it just isn't real. Let me just start by telling you this. This is the only draft that has a Pro Bowl player picked in 12 straight rounds. So no matter if you were picking in the first round or the last, you had a real chance at a seriously productive NFL player. Not only that, but this draft had the most Hall of Famers out of any draft since 1977 with 8, as well as Pro Bowlers with 41. And from 1983 to 1999, the Hall of Famers from this draft class alone made it to every Super Bowl during that span of time except for just 4 of them. So some of these guys from this draft you may have heard of are John Elway, Dan Marino, I think he was in like a movie or something, Jim Kelly, Bruce Matthews, Eric Dickerson, Richard Dent, Darrell Green, and Jim Covert. These guys combined for an unbelievable 57 Pro Bowl selections, 20 All-Pros, 7 Super Bowl rings, and 2 MVPs. And they even produced a head coach in Gary Kubiak, and their Mr. Irrelevant ended up getting his own ESPN 30 for 30 documentary. And like I said, this is also arguably the deepest draft ever, with Hall of Famer, All-Pro, and Super Bowl MVP Richard Dent being drafted in the 8th round. Of course, there are more Pro Bowlers in this draft than any other since 1977, so I can't go over everyone, so here's just all the Pro Bowlers vomited on the screen. And I guess most notably, Roger Craig is the best player here that didn't make the Hall of Fame. Now, the only thing that could arguably hold this draft class back from being the undisputed GOAT of drafts is that until 1993, the NFL had 12 rounds in the draft starting in 1977, so there simply was more rounds to find more diamonds in the rough. And the 2011 NFL draft is one that did not have the luxury of 12 rounds, but it didn't really matter. The 2011 NFL draft started with an unprecedented 7 straight Pro Bowlers selected, and 9 out of the first 11 players were Pro Bowlers as well. And what this draft has over all others is the diversity. In the first round alone, you have one of the best single-season quarterbacks ever with Cam Newton, whose 2015 season is still brought up today. Then you got 2 of the best receivers of the 2010s in AJ Green and a Hall of Fame lock in Julio Jones. Some of the best defensive players in NFL history with JJ Watt and Von Miller, and the offensive brick wall that is Tyron Smith. So not only do you have bona fide Hall of Famers in the front of the draft, but at the end of the draft as well. In the 6th round, the Eagles picked up one of the best centers of all time in Jason Kelce, fleecing the rest of the NFL, while just 1 round earlier, the Seahawks snagged Richard Sherman, the best corner for a majority of the 2010s. Now, if we combined the 6 players with the best shot at the Hall of Fame, like the last 2 drafts, these guys would combine for 39 Pro Bowls, 21 All-Pro selections, and 4 Super Bowl championships. So these guys, who are still playing, already have more All-Pro selections than the previous 8 Hall of Fame players from the 1983 draft. Also, if it weren't for the 7th round of this draft being completely devoid of talent, this draft could have matched the 1983 draft in terms of talent per round, but, you know, it didn't happen. Now, allow me to introduce you to the most underrated draft in NFL history. The 1993 NFL draft just seems like some random footnote in draft history that nobody really remembers, and with 4 too many no-names in the top 10, as well as one team forfeiting their pick, I can totally see why. But if we look back at this graph, the 1993 draft had more Pro Bowlers than any other draft during this decade, and just barely missed out on the most Hall of Famers. So who were these players that made this draft so strong? Well, this draft had Hall of Famers in the first round, a Hall of Famer in the second round, and 2 Hall of Famers in the third round. Now, there wasn't a gem like Richard Dent or Jason Kelce waiting late in the draft, but what this draft did have was consistency. And the Hall of Famers here were the definition of consistent, but still, there is a good chance that you haven't heard of a few of these guys. Willie Roaf, quietly one of the most dominant tackles in NFL history, who racked up 11 Pro Bowls and 4 All-Pros in just 12 seasons. Then you got Will Shields, another offensive lineman, a right guard who made 12 Pro Bowls, and then you move on to some more memorable guys like Jerome Bettis, Michael Strahan, and John Lynch. And these 5 guys just got the job done as they cooked up 45 Pro Bowls, 12 All-Pros, and 3 Lombardi trophies altogether. Remember, this is only 5 guys. Compared to the previous draft, pound for pound, these 5 men may have been more dominant than all of the other draft classes by themselves. And the most impressive thing with this draft, in 8 rounds, every single round of the draft had at least 2 Pro Bowlers. Although the 1983 draft had a Pro Bowler in all 12 rounds, most rounds only had 1, whereas in 1993, at the very least, there was 2 guys in each round who could be labeled as one of the best at their position. And even 2 out of the last 6 picks in the entire draft were Pro Bowl quarterbacks. Crazy. So what do you think? I just laid down the facts from statistically the 4 best draft classes in NFL history. So what is the greatest NFL draft in NFL history in your opinion? Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one. And if you like this video, then watch this video right here on every NFL team's worst season ever. It's pretty good, trust me. Anyways, until next time.